now. You're on.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. My name is David Scholl. I think somebody said I'm the first of one of these, so puts a lot of pressure on attendance dropping off drastically for the next one. So hopefully that's not the case. And the title that I was given assumes I've got a pretty good crystal ball, and there's a lot of people already on here and some names you've shared with me that are going to be on this call that probably got better crystal balls than I. So I'm going to try and keep my talking to a little bit of the shorter end and see if we can get some of the other wisdom on this call to weigh in, because a topic like the COVID's impact on real estate to me is awfully large topic. And I'll touch on a few things. There's no shortage of articles being written about that very subject right now. So there's plenty of people weighing in with opinions. I'll try and focus on what I think are some of the things that have resonated with me, and then I'd love to get more of a discussion going if everybody doesn't mind. I guess first I'll just give a little background. I was a Fiji down there, graduated in 81. 81, we were watching the primes work its way to 21%. The economy was reeling after Nixon, Ford, and Carter, and Reagan hadn't had a chance to really get his stuff working yet. So I immediately enrolled in graduate school, came up to ASU, spent 3 semesters at ASU getting a graduate degree, thinking that by December of 82, things would be better. They were much worse. So I think that's actually the month they claimed the very bottom of the recession. So I was the pride of my MBA class because it took me 6 months to get a job. I started for $600 a month. So I was killing it as soon as I got out of graduate school. So I was lucky enough to get a job at CB with a couple of the guys that are on this call, and was a trainee over there. Within 11 months after being a trainee at Coldwell Banker Commercial, was what it was called back then, the guy I had hoped to go to work for left and went to Westcor, and a few months later he invited me to come to Westcor. So 11 months out of school, I had gotten the job that I thought it would have taken me 10 years to get, and really spent from June of 84 through earlier this afternoon being in the retail development business, building shopping centers of all sizes, single tenant, multi-tenant, and 26 years of that was, or 25 years of that was with Westcor, and then I started another company with some ex-Westcor guys that we've been working on doing for the last 10 years. So it's been a great place. As they say, retail follows rooftops, and it's been a great time for 30 years to be working on that in Arizona with all the rooftops that have been built from Tucson to Flagstaff. So it's a business that treated me very well, and my passion was always in investments. Didn't want to work in Chicago or New York City, so I kind of got talked into applying sort of the same investment principles that I studied in both my degrees to a commodity out here in Arizona, and that was real estate, and followed a lot of friends into the business, a lot of Fijis into the business, and to a T, most all of them have done well, and it's been a testament to just the Arizona market for 35 or 40 years. So that is pretty much my background. Like I said, I did mostly retail. Westcor did build some office buildings that I got involved in. We redid a golf course that I was in charge of. Had no idea what I was doing then, but certainly know a lot more about it now than I did back then. Built a resort company. So while I watched from a safe distance, I learned a little bit about the resort development business, and just sort of paid attention. So I would love to just maybe hand out some comments that I've thought about and been witnessing and reading like the rest of you on this COVID stuff. And I'm going to start probably with more of the obvious, and then I'll maybe finish with some of the retail takeaways, at least that I see out there. Like most everybody, I think a lot of people are concluding that maybe the least impacted by all of this might be industrial. And we'll let some of the guys that maybe know more about that enlighten us later on about that. But it seems to me that all we've done is ramp up distribution needs, last mile fulfillment needs, warehousing needs. If anything, COVID showed us maybe some weak spots where we couldn't get product out like we thought we could. And so I'm kind of getting the feeling, and from what I've read, most people thinking that the industrial business and sector of real estate might be one of the least negatively impacted and may actually get a positive impact out of this. So I think COVID has driven more of society towards a digital lifestyle, and I think that probably bodes well for industrial. The resort and hotel business may be just the opposite. It may be who's been hit worse than anybody. They probably have a good chance of bouncing back. I was sitting with a hotel developer and owner today. I don't know how many of you know Scott Lyon. He's a ex-Westcor guy that started West Rock Hotels, runs a sanctuary here in town, and the Valley Ho and the Mountain Shadows. And he watched his occupancy for the last 2 or 3 months go to 2%. And said most hotels around the country are running at about 25% occupancy right now. He said most of them think about 50+% is what they need to just cover expenses. So you can see the devastation just with those metrics that's happened in hotels and resorts the last few months. He did say it's picking up. He's doing quite a bit better. He's more closer to about 25% right now. No, he said average is 25. He's at 50% right now. And they've used the pool capacity and social distancing in the pool to determine how many rooms they'll rent out. So based on the number of rooms that he truly thinks he can do and be socially responsible, he's at 100% capacity. So the rooms he's willing to rent right now are rented, and that's roughly a 55% occupancy at Mountain Shadows. I think that was similar at Valley Ho and Sanctuary. But he said the problem with the Arizona hotels is even if we're bouncing back, we're bouncing back with the lowest and weakest rates of the year, and we lost what were typically our highest and best rates. So he thinks it's going to be several years before the general public is comfortable with staying at any and every hotel that doesn't go through a laundry list of questions about cleanliness and just how they're sterilized and all that. So he says there's tough days ahead. Let's see, there was something else he told me. He did say that some of the emphasis going forward is going to be on individual hotel chains being able to make the consumer feel comfortable that their room is clean. I don't know if you guys know about a technology out there. I've read a little bit about it. It's about you take water, salt, and electricity, and you can generate a mist and a handheld misting device, which is like 100 times or 50 times more sterilizing than hand sanitizer. And the Marriott Corp has stated that they are going to wand their rooms at least once a day with this misting system. They're buying all the misting systems for every clean housekeeping person to be able to go in every room and mist every surface, mist every remote control, bathroom counters, countertops, all that stuff. And every other hotel chain is to compete and not be left behind is probably going to have to do something that matches that type of commitment to keeping things sterile and clean. So he says there's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of marketing and efforts by the hotel biz to really go out and convince the consumer that it's safe. So hotel business, obviously their food and beverage side is strictly going to be a reflection of occupancy. I would love to hear what our expert on here has to say, and he knows who he is. So we'll wait to see what he has to say. The other thing he said was that the bounce back he thought was going to be slow. and that there's probably going to be, they'll probably see a quicker pickup in leisure business than in group business. He thinks that corporate America and the group business may hit pause for a while. And I think a lot, I don't know this, but I think a lot of the group business is what had made shoulder seasons so appealing in Arizona. So we may see the leisure business really cause local hotels, at least Arizona. And I'm not smart enough to, or haven't heard enough about other places around the country, but it may be that the leisure business is really what they're going to have to dial into going forward. Have not read a whole lot different than what I'm sure most of you have read about office, just the whole understanding and realization of how much productivity can occur at home may shrink office size, and we may see some downsizing in large tenants that have a lot of data input and stuff that can be done from home. So again, I don't know too much about the office business and don't really know how to foresee in that. But like I said, you guys have seen, I'm sure, some of the building or some of the articles like I have that are just talking about some of the revelations that CEOs are seeing and how productivity didn't drop off like they thought, and we may just see more people, even if it's not permanently working from home. You may see reduced staff where two people are using the same desk and alternating working at home or going to the office. And I'd be curious what some of the rest of you have to say about that too. I would love, Bert, anybody else that really can maybe walk us through how this is impacting apartments and even residential to that extent. I know a lot of the residential REITs have come roaring back. I assume that's because they've got they've disseminated some positive outlook to the analysts, but stock prices have really rebounded on some of those home builders and apartment owners. So would love some of your guys' thoughts on that. I don't hear too much about the apartment business being impacted from occupancy as much as I do just from the ability to collect rent for a few months here. Clearly there's been some new statutes passed which are tying the hands of landlords and not minimizing, but just creating some limitations on what landlords can and can't do. Clearly that's going to impact not just multifamily, but all commercial landlords. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I drift into retail. I think maybe after, in my opinion, after resorts, maybe retail is going to be impacted the most. Retail, starting in the Great Recession, truly has never come back from that. And we've had a 10 or 11 year expansion, and I don't think retail has fully come back to what it was. And somewhat concerned that we throw this double whammy effectively on retail, that it could take another big step backwards as far as productivity and just just health of that sector. I would tell you just some data points. The United States probably has twice as much retail square footage per capita than the next closest country, which is Great Britain. Clearly, American and the consumer-driven economy and a government trying to drive a consumer-driven economy has paved the way for tremendous amounts of retail in this country. And it's just clear that it's going to be, decades or more of really house cleaning to get us back in line with really the amount of retail space this country needs. So, we're going to continue to lose department stores. I assume you guys saw that Nordstrom is closing down at Chandler Mall, blaming that on COVID. But we heard that rumor more than a year ago. So I think a lot of department stores are saying, wow, this is the perfect excuse to go ahead and lower the boom on a lot of big box. Clearly, mom and pops that were living somewhat paycheck to paycheck as retailers have been devastated by this. But we truly have, other than the food and beverage business in this country, we really had not seen a full recovery in retail from 2009 and 10. So, America's gotten used to shopping online. it's a great, it's a great, um, great way to do it. For a guy that built shopping centers all his life, I'm shocked at how much I buy online. So, um, it's certainly here to stay. It's not going to turn. We're not going to lose stores. We're not going to lose brick and mortar retail. We certainly don't need as much as we have. And I think most all landlords are going to have to make decisions about, are they going to compete purely on convenience and price point in the future and go head to head with the internet? Are they going to fill their centers with internet proof tenants, which we can get into if anybody's interested? Or are you going to try and create retail around experiential destinations and tap into the boom in microbrews and food and beverage and the placemaking that's going on with the restaurant explosion of the last 10 years? So I sort of feel like that's the way things were looking when COVID showed up. It wasn't particularly strong. The work that we had done the last 10 years had really been on repositioning existing retail. We only did one ground up building in the last decade, or ground up project in the last decade. And most everything was driven by food and beverage. We redid a center here in Phoenix, and it used to be that the days of courting small retail tenants, the first thing out of your mouth was your anchor lineup that you were going to deliver, and wouldn't they love to be a part of that anchor lineup? And today, no small tenant wants to know anything other than who's your restaurant lineup. And so if you don't have a good restaurant lineup that's going to help you create a destination and sense of place 2 or 3 different times during the day, then you're having a hard time getting anybody that really wants to come, get in line with all of those tenants. So very, very difficult last decade. This COVID thing, just a quick start on how retail rents work. Retail rents have and always, I assume always will be, a factor of sales volumes. In our business, typically retail tenants can pay anywhere from 8 to 12% of their sales volume in minimum rents. So if they're doing $300 a foot, they can pay a $30 rent. If they're doing $400 a foot, a $40 rent, just to make it easy. And that's not including their net charges and their utilities and things like that. That's just sort of minimum rent only. And as a landlord, in the retail world, you get to see what their sales volumes are, so you know who's sick before they know they're sick, and you know who can afford a rent bump when the next option comes around and who can't. But landlord net income is 100% directly tied to sales volumes. And sales volumes are directly tied to the throughput of bodies coming through stores. So you take the average restaurant, bar, and you suddenly tell them that, to be a good corporate citizen and to protect employees, they need to maintain 6 and 8 foot distances from everybody inside. And you're probably cutting capacity in a bar by at least half, if not more, and restaurants the same. So if you're going to cut, throughput in half, you're going to cut volumes in half, and you're going to eventually, landlords are going to see rents, I think, drastically go down, unless, all of this is assuming that the new normal stays around a while. Obviously, if there's a cure to this thing and people can be assured that life is normal again, and we can eliminate all social distancing and the fear of employees and the fear of consumers goes away, then all bets are off and maybe we can return to normal. But in the meantime, I think you're going to see some pretty drastic reductions in volumes. And I don't think that's just food and beverage. I think it's going to be, all of these retailers that have got footprints painted on the ground, and people at the door now saying, why don't you wait a few minutes and let's let some people leave. It used to be pack them in, the more the merrier, get in line at the cash register. Now we're telling people to get in line at the front door. And I just don't know if the consumer is going to, be allowed to spend, the jing that they've got in their pocket as fast as they once had. So I think retail landlords are going to see themselves with a top line numbers going down, and quite frankly, they're probably going to have more more expenses on the side of security, on cleanliness and housekeeping. And, think about an indoor mall and how many times that railing along the second level mall walk is going to have to be wiped down by somebody who didn't used to work there. So I can see common area maintenance costs and all kinds of the expense side to get employees to feel comfortable and safe is going to go up while revenues are going down. And I think it's going to be real tough for retailers for a while. We've already seen a bunch of the bankruptcies. I think there'll be more. I think you'll probably see a bunch of tenants like Macy's and Dillard's probably even say to major creditors or capital providers, if we don't get the type of working capital we need or revolving lines of credit, then we're going to go ahead and go to bankruptcy. So I think there could be a lot of refinancing and restructuring going on just to avoid more bankruptcies, which is tantamount in a landlord's eyes to the same thing as a bankruptcy and a restructure. So I think that's going to be difficult. I think one of the things we might see, an article I read said that, well, let me back up. I was on a panel a year or so ago with a couple of restaurateurs who were bemoaning how disruptive all this food delivery business has been to their kitchens. They've got kitchens that were built to serve people sitting in a dining room, and every 10 minutes now there's a knock on the back door with some guy saying, "I need my food, I'm delivering." And if it's not done, he's impatient. Everybody in the kitchen has to scramble, and all of a sudden that is made the priority over the people in the dining room. And a lot of these restaurateurs were saying that they're literally going to have to redesign their kitchens to handle all of the food delivery services, because they can't have a single kitchen anymore. There's got to be a separate kitchen because they're worried about the experience the person at home's getting when that food's delivered, and they're worried about the experience in the dining room. So one of the things they're saying is we may see a lot more design in future restaurants to accommodate delivery. And the article went on to say that we may see food trucks get to the point where rather than just going to big events, they start trolling through near parks and in neighborhoods at dusk, and almost like the popsicle truck when you were a kid, coming through town and see who wants to come out and get their dinner off a food truck. So not sure I'm there yet, but the article was suggesting that the food truck business might be a way to, not a way, but might be a sliver of the food and beverage industry that sees a little positivity out of this. The other thing we've been kicking around is, I don't know how many of you guys know the term fast casual. It really refers to a place where you go in, order your food, you sit down and somebody brings it to you, or you go up and get it, but you're not waited on with a server, a bus staff, and all of that. Most people would say that the fast casual business came about by rising minimum wage in places like California, who just had to start cutting out servers. There is some thought that we may see an acceleration in the fast casual business as a way to cut costs in restaurants and minimize the amount of people touching your food and all of that. We may see a lot of restaurants converting over to fast casual rather than sitting down and having a wait staff. So that's something I think to be on the lookout for. There's been some discussion that this whole COVID thing may accelerate e-commerce, that some of the people that were slow adapters and enjoyed their trip to the shopping center, if that fear level got high enough, may have just forced themselves to learn how to order off their phone or off their computer, and probably experienced a fairly good experience of, within a day or two delivery of a lot of items. So there's the thought that late adopters may have been accelerated into adopting e-commerce, which could ramp up. I would say stock price and some of the sales volumes at Amazon certainly seem to be confirming that. And that could further impact the brick and mortar business. But as I said earlier, I think the brick and mortar business is here to stay. Certainly not in the size and the amount of square feet that we've always had or have had in the past. But between the stuff that you can't get online, which is what I call the internet proof stuff, whether that's alcohol, guns, ammunition, all the services like haircuts and manicures, pedicures, all that stuff. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of tenants that are not going to be pushed around by the internet, and that's what the current retail developers is calling the core of their go forward design and tenant mix, along with food and beverage. So between that need for those sticks and bricks types of tenants, I think grocery is safe going into the future. And I think the big box is, people like Walmart and Target are getting their e-commerce figured out. So they're going to be on both platforms and do well. Again, they're going to use opportunities like COVID to close down unproductive stores and restructure and use it as some kind of a business strategy. But without babbling for another 30 minutes, I'm going to cut it off there and say, those are just some things that I wanted to emphasize. I know between Jeff and Bert, we've got other people that I'm looking at that could weigh in on housing and hospitality. And I'd love to shut up and listen to some of the other wisdom on this call and or answer questions. So not that I know the answer, but a good question might stimulate a good debate. So
hey, David,
thanks for having me.
I'm going to start with a question that Jeff sent through on the chat, and then I would ask everybody else, if you got a question or if you're just willing to talk, give some of your expertise, just send a chat message through so I see your name. But the question for you, David, is, any advice you have for a Fiji considering a career in real estate? So aim this at the undergraduates.
Yeah. I actually spend a lot of my time and enjoy a lot of time, paying it forward. I'm 60 now, and it feels like I've had more fun in the last 10 years trying to help young guys. So I would encourage anybody. I'd be happy to give my cell phone number. I'd love to meet and help anybody that wants to sit and talk. But yeah, I would say that, the Great Recession, I think, started to, it hit so many families so hard, and because the word real estate was wrapped up as a guilty industry in that whole crash, I think a lot of people said, wow, I don't want to get in the industry that caused my parents to have to downsize and go bankrupt and all that. So I think I've seen in the last decade probably fewer young people getting into the business, and that probably opens the door to now people reconsidering the real estate business. And I think it's still got a great future. I don't think Arizona is going to grow at the pace it did for the 35 years I was involved. But I do think there's going to be growth. And I think real estate development in the future will probably be more socially conscious, environmentally conscious. And if that's important and interesting to you, I would say that our industry probably has lots of opportunity to change its ways and be a little more of both of those. And I would say you probably have to think about looking at the built environment and say, I want to take real estate skills and see how we can improve upon the existing built environment, because I don't think there'll be as much demand for ground up development as there is redevelopment. And quite frankly, I always say this, and so hopefully none of you have had to listen to me say it too many times. Arizona is just now getting to the age where we've got a built environment that's been around for 60 or 70 years. If you think about it, we didn't have a lot of buildings in this state until air conditioning showed up. And if you look at the built environment in this state, most of what you see are buildings that are 60 years old and newer. And it's just now getting to the point where some and a lot of those are starting to need to be redeveloped. So I think anybody getting into real estate in the future, you have to be willing to say the entrepreneurism, the creativity, and the design may be about fixing some great old buildings and bringing them into the modern world rather than just blading desert and building ground up anymore.
Great. Any questions and this includes undergrads. Anybody else on the call got some questions? Comments?
Can I ask one?
Yeah.
Is Jeff still here?
Yeah.
Fill us in, Jeff, on your industry.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what you said. Like you, I've been fortunate to be in this business since the mid 80s, seen a lot of cycles, but we've never seen anything like this in the travel and tourism business. We're fortunate that we're asset light right now. We only have one operating resort in our portfolio. It closed the third week of March. It will reopen the 4th of June in the Hilton Head area, Montage Palmetto Bluff, down outside of Savannah. And, we had a $250,000 capital call just to reopen the hotel and buy all of the COVID-related mitigation stuff that you mentioned that Scott filled you in on. Going to be a long slog back. Luxury was kind of leading really through this last 10 years. The luxury segment did very well. And I think it'll be the last segment that recovers of the hospitality. My personal opinion is it's going to be a long recovery for anything that's travel and tourism related. So anyway, that's just been our experience, our observation. And I think the comment that Scott made about the group business, which for resorts is a huge segment. I'd say most of our resorts are probably 50% group, 50% leisure. And when the groups aren't showing up to meet and fill those demand periods that are a little bit softer, it really poses a problem financially for the resort.
That's great. Thank you. I
Hey,
just realized people are sending me text messages.
Yeah. So that's I can ask the questions to you. I'm following them. But what I would ask is somebody has asked for your contact info. So if you chat your contact information in there, then people can follow up. And while you're doing that, is there a large scale retail development trend that you see happening soon?
Renovation. I'm just going to go back to what I said. I don't see any long-term retail trend that is going to be based around ground up development. But I do see renovation. And I'd have to say one of the things I worry about is the overbuilding of restaurants. If you think about the fact that over the last decade, we were watching boomers get to the empty nest stage, and we were watching their children, the boomers, push off having kids. Those two things together probably created more demand than we've ever had in this country for eating out. And I think the last decade responded to both of those peculiarities, and we exploded with restaurants. And I'm not sure they're all going to survive as millennials age and boomers start drinking everything out of a straw. So that would worry me. I think at some point we're going to have to figure out what to do with a lot of food space. But I think renovation is going to be the future. There just isn't going to be demand for a lot of building. The other thing that's related to retail is somebody's going to have to figure out how to do that last mile delivery, which industrial people are working on. But retailers, I've always thought if you could get the zoning codes to work out, because right now you can't do it because of city zoning ordinances, but a lot of these big boxes could be converted to great last mile distribution. But the codes are going to have to change for them to do that.
Let's see, next question. How does a developer like Vintage Partners select design firms and contractors in the bidding process? What are some things you're looking for in the proposals?
Say that again?
Yeah, so how does a developer like Vintage Partners select design firms and contractors in the bidding process? What are some things you look for in their proposals?
I would say the whole time I was at Westcor, the whole time I've been at Vintage, we have never been, and I've never been the type of person that wanted to lock in with one contractor and one architect and just go run around doing everything as the same team. We really believe that we would grow more if we were exposed to more consultants, and we felt like if we were lucky enough and blessed enough to have business, that we needed to spread that business around. So I've always believed in getting to know as many and more consultants in the construction design side as possible. What was most important to us was a sense of urgency, an attention to detail, and creativity and problem solving. That's what my business is nothing more than solving problems. It's not, some esoteric bunch of information you've got to memorize. It's doing things when people say you can't do that. It's figuring out how to get it done. And we're always looking for consultants that can demonstrate to us, here's how we were faced with a problem, and here's the creativity we came up with to get around it. And then just design creativity. We're constantly looking for ways for our tenants to be presented. The retail business is about your tenants being front and center, not the ego of the developer with his fountains and his marble floors, but we're always looking for ways to make our tenants pop and have them be the center of attention. And so we're always interested in architects that are thinking of ways to do new storefront, thinking of ways to bring drama to the center, to attract people to those tenants, making visibility better, making parking more convenient, all that stuff. So that's a quick answer.
Right. Okay.
I just put up my cell phone, but it said from me to Dave Hill. So somehow I went privately. So I'm just going to tell you where it is. It's 602-525-3469. You can call me anytime, any day, and would love to meet or chat or get together with anybody that wants to.
The next question here is really from to the young guys on the phone. Do you people think young people are going to gravitate to single family homes and away from condos? Any of the young guys want to take on that?
Come on, Bert.
There's a few students on here. Anybody got any thoughts?
What if you feel young?
I could probably take a shot at answering that question, not from the young guy side, obviously, but the housing market it has gone through a lot of very positive growth for the last several decades here. We were late coming out of the recovery. The coastal markets recovered the quickest, and then people started to recognize that the metrics in Metro Phoenix were very attractive from a housing perspective. Our average rents were low. We had incredible population and job growth, and both private and institutional capital started focusing on Phoenix, and they haven't really stopped for the last 5+ years. We've seen incredible interest in our markets from almost all of the major institutional capital. It's an environment where you have a young population, you have good job possibilities, you've got a great opportunity to establish yourself here, and from a rental perspective, you're not burdened like some of the major markets with a inordinate percentage of your income going towards housing. Yeah. The rent in Phoenix is about $1,200 a month, all classes A, B, and C considered, and almost $1,500 a month for Class A. And that represents only about a 20 or 25% rent burden compared to other more expensive places to live across the country. This is all pre-COVID for the most part. So with what's happened, again, pre-COVID, what we've seen in the country is a shift towards more renting than ever before, a higher propensity to rent than to own, and it varies by age cohort. But what's interesting is, along with that, you've seen a variety of different housing types. You've gone from, at least here, a more traditional suburban not, medium density, 2 to 3 story to 4 to 6 story, then 6 to 7 story, a lot of mid-rise, higher density infill development, some of it mixed use, residential and retail. And what was interesting is, people on the older end of the scale are downsizing, and at the same time, people in the 20 to 30-year-old range are saying they want to maybe hold off on buying homes, making major decisions. Renting is a better choice for them. So you had kind of a convergence of age cohorts and wanting to be, in more of an active live, work, play kind of environment. And Phoenix went into this with strong metrics by almost every measurement, and we anticipate that Dave was right. We'll come out of this along with the industrial side of the commercial real estate world the quickest, probably the first quarter of next year. And yeah,
I have heard some people say that they think places like New York, where people are living on top of each other, and the fear of COVID being able to run rampant in such tight quarters might accelerate people leaving big city centers to come to places that are a little bit more suburban, like Arizona, even if they do go back into a 4-story or 6-story, but that this may really accelerate a lot of the flight out of places like Philadelphia and New Jersey and New York and places like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that has happened, Dave, is the way we work now has started to morph into the way we live, and major corporations across the country have recognized that their workforce is pretty productive working from home, and that's going to have a long-lasting effect, I think, after things normalize. And if you're being told that it's okay with your employer to work from home, or you're a student and your classes have gone online for the near term, there's no reason for you to pay exorbitant rent to live in a really small, cramped space in New York City or San Francisco, when you can go home and or move to a place that you consider to be more fun, that's much less expensive, and accomplish the same thing and enjoy a better lifestyle. So in my company, Dave, we have 78,000 feet in 3 floors and this new open office environment. And I got to believe that that's not going to continue going forward, and major corporations are reevaluating whether or not that's a good choice. Do you need that much space? And so that's a huge impact to the office market.
What else is popping up, Matt?
Yeah, got two other comments here, and we're going to try to get us done here by 5. So as Dave mentioned, a lot of consumerism has shifted more towards online shopping. This being the case, how has this impacted the real estate developments you worked on in the past, and how do you see commercial real estate being impacted moving forward with this shift in consumerism?
Well, one of the ways it's impacted, I've touched on a little bit, is just the importance of the tenant lineup now is all about your food and beverage. And one of the negatives that's done is, it used to be that when you built a shopping center, maybe 5 or 10% of your space was a restaurant or two on a pad. And now, because there aren't enough tenants to fill the obsolete inline shop space, we're seeing lots of shopping centers now get close to 30 and 40% of the inline space is food and beverage in one form or another, whether everything from a yogurt to a sit-down dinner place. And so you have parking lots that were built for the previous design, which was not nearly as heavy a traffic driving restaurants. And all of a sudden, you've got now a lot of restaurants in shopping centers that don't have the parking for it. It's taken a little bit of the enjoyability out of a trip to a shopping center. So that's a negative impact. And again, that's a roundabout way, because as retailers have died off because of the internet shopping, the backfilling of that space has had to go to somebody. And we're seeing it be churches and big boxes and fitness centers and trampoline places and food and beverage. And so it's all this stuff that you can't get on the internet. And a lot of the infrastructure, for lack of a better word, in those centers isn't built to handle that type of a tenant mix. So that's why I said the future of real estate, at least in the retail world, is going to be renovating and recreating centers so they can handle what those available tenants demand today.
That makes sense. What's your take on the rental income erosion in the next 3 to 9 months in the retail sector?
I think it could be half. I mean, I listened to a call the other day that was the Macerich CFO and CEO talking, and they collected about 20% of their April rents, and they were trending towards a little better than that in May. So, you know, if the retailers in this country really stumble and can't get going for, you know, the rest of the summer, I mean, you're talking about 4, 5, 6 months out of a calendar year where the rental income collected maybe something less than half of what it was. That destroys a budget. And obviously, you know, it's up to each landlord to decide how they get made whole, with either adding term to the end of the lease, or once things get back to normal, if they get back to normal enough, increasing some rent to cover some missed rent before. But it's going to have a huge impact, I think, for the next year. Upwards of maybe half as much rent gets collected.
That's great. I think that's the questions we have. I do want to share with everybody, you'll all see an email coming out tomorrow. For those of you that know him, Tommy Roy is going to be our next presentation here coming up in June. So he's going to talk about his career in sports. So I'm sure that's going to be pretty interesting. And any of you that have any other ideas of interesting speakers and varying topics, don't be afraid to message me or Jeff Mongan, Darren Webb, you know, Dave, any of us, and then we can reach out to them. Other than that, I would say, Dave, thanks for spending some time with me. Actually, I'm not in real estate, and I learned a lot, so it was great.
Well, you guys are flattered me, asking me to go first, but you also took a huge risk, so thank you for that.
Well, great. Hey, thanks for everybody for joining.
Thanks,
and
Dave.
We'll be back in touch.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Take
Stay
care, bye.
safe.